Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today let's talk about all of the books that I read in April. In April there were 3 books that I absolutely loved, 2 books that I really didn't get on with, but then most of the rest of them were pretty good. I had a pretty good reading month overall. I read around 15 books in the end, even though I felt like I was gonna be in a reading slump for some reason, even though I actually still was reading quite a lot. 15 books is around my average. I just kept feeling like I was about to go into a reading slump, and I just kept kind of worrying that I wasn't reading enough, or that I was just putting things down. But I ended up now I'm looking back at the 15 books that I read. I had a great time and I actually ended up reading so many different things. Let's go through all of the books that I read in the month of April. I think I'll start off with the positive. I'll start off by telling you the 3 books that I absolutely loved this month. They're all quite different from each other, and these are all hovering around a 4.5 to 5-star read. So firstly, at the beginning of the month, I read Reservoir Bitches, which is a short story collection, and this is by a Mexican author, and it was longlisted for the International Booker Prize. I'm actually not a huge fan of short story collections usually. I don't often find them to be perfect or my favorite type of reads, because I find that even if I really enjoy a couple of stories, it's really rare for me to enjoy an entire collection and rate it really highly. But this one really worked for me. These stories are just brutal and savage, and the women in which are reflected in these stories are just so unique. There's such a strong sense of voice within these characters, and I absolutely ate it up. A lot of the stories are very wild. You're following a whole range of different women all across Mexico. You're following a socialite who's trying to help her politician husband. You're following the daughter of a cartel boss. You're following people on the streets who are trying to pickpocket for money to support their family. There are so many different walks of life in this, but all of the stories just have this power, this rage behind them, and I just absolutely loved it. Highly recommend. If you like short, strange, brutal fiction, then read this book. I would say though that there is a lot of violence in this. They are not happy stories, but I also for me, the reason why this elevates it as a short story collection is because you can really clearly feel the author's point, and there is a strong thread running through, and especially when you come to the last story, if you hadn't already picked up on the threads, the last story does really pull it all together, and I just really loved it. The next book that I absolutely loved took me completely by surprise. I have seen this book around, and I don't think I would have ever picked it up because I really didn't like just the way it looked, and I just assumed it was a different book than what it was. But I read it and I loved it, and it is Clear. I think actually the US cover does a better job of capturing the vibe of this book, but I really don't like the UK cover. But I was just looking for an audiobook to listen to, and this was free on my library at the time that I just needed something to listen to, and I just started listening to it and I loved it so much. It really took me by surprise. I was listening to it at the beginning, and it's such a slow kind of grower. This story just slowly grew on me to the point where I didn't even realize how much it was affecting me, and I really loved it. This book is following a new minister. This is a historical fiction, and he is being sent to this really remote island off the coast of Scotland where nobody lives except for this one man, and they don't even speak the same language, and this man has been living on this remote island on his own for decades, and this minister's job is to basically tell him that he's no longer allowed to live there, that the landowner wants him off. They want to replace his home with just pastures for sheep because it's more productive. And this is something that happened to so many people during this time in the 1840s, where people were just cleared out of their homes because they wanted to convert it to farmland and get people off the land. And so this story is just following these 2 men who can't speak to each other, and this kind of growing relationship that they have, and it's just so beautiful, and also it's so steeped in the nature on this remote island that is just so beautifully described. And I love the way that the language was used, their lack of common language was used, and how their relationship built. And I won't tell you more about it because it's quite a short read, so I will leave you to discover it for yourself. But it was just so tender touching, and I just wouldn't have ever expected this from like the book. Whenever I saw it advertised, I'm not sure that the marketing has this like been that successful for this book for me, to be honest, but this is me telling you I absolutely love this book. I was just so interested as well. Like I really enjoyed it, the historical aspect as well, and learning about these people being driven off their lands. And there's lots of different like historical aspects that are really interesting and like well connected to the story, but it doesn't focus too much on the historical. It's very much a character driven story. So wonderful. I can highly recommend this one. This is also like a 4.5 to 5-star read for me. And then finally, the last book that I read in the month was also one of my favorites, and that is also another short story collection. What is going on with me? But it is Salt Slow. This one's been on my radar for a while because I really have enjoyed both of the other books that I've read by, is it Julia Armfield? To be honest, the first one that I read, which was Our Wives Under the Sea, I think was a little bit like overhyped for me at the time, because then when I read it I was like, oh no, it's good, but like it's not like amazing like everyone's saying. But then I read her more recent one, Private Rights, absolutely loved it. So now I want to go back and read Our Wives Under the Sea again, because now I've read Salt Slow, which is her first book I think that she came out with, and I just think that she's going to be one of my new favourite authors. I'm just really enjoying the way that she writes her characters, the way that she has this strange haunting vibe to all of her stories, the way she does relationships, and they're just always like something surprising. There's some surprising twist, there's some kind of mystery involved. These all have a touch of the horror, or like I would say at least the speculative fiction aspect to them. They're not scary stories, but they have a darkness and a hauntingness to them. Some of my favourite stories in this involve like one story where people's sleeps like separate from their body completely, so they have like this shadow following them around. And then another one that I loved was about a girl who is growing up and going through puberty, but then kind of realizes that the way that she's going through puberty is like maybe she's not just a late bloomer, maybe she's becoming something else. There are so many stories in this that were just really good, and I just absolutely loved it. And I'm just going to definitely read everything that Julia Armfield comes out with now, because I think she might be one of my new favourite authors. I really love the way that she writes. So I can't believe that I'm recommending 2 different short story collections to you today, because that's crazy. That's not me, but both of them are honestly amazing. So now let's go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about all of the books that really did not work for me this month. Firstly, the worst book that I read this month by a mile, and like one of the most annoying books that I've read this year. This pissed me off so much, and that is Hagstone. This was another one that I picked up kind of on a whim. It wasn't on my TBR. I needed an audiobook and I was out and about, and this one was free like on my library, so I just thought I would listen to it, and I was kind of interested at the beginning. It is about this artist who lives on a remote island, but then there's an even more remote island where a commune of women basically live cut off from the world, and they don't interact with anyone in her town and her community. But then one day they ask her to come and visit, and they want to commission a piece of art from her. She's an artist, and she's just very curious and wants to go, and then starts like learning more about these women, about why they're there and about their society. So as you're reading through this book, like there is this intriguing kind of mystery, and it's building up, and you're becoming more and more interested in what's going on, about why these commune of women have like suddenly kind of opened up to the outside world. And there's also this like mysterious noise that happens on the island that Nell, like the main character, has always grown up on, and it only affects some people. Only some people can hear it, but it's like this like devastating, like really loud and like crazy kind of noise that's like very mysterious. People don't know if it's supernatural, if it's like a nature, if it's like, you know, like psychosis, like a group psychosis. But basically they're just like adding up all these little different ingredients to this mystery at the end, and let me tell you, nothing gets resolved by the end of this book. Nothing is resolved, not even on a personal level, but let alone the mystery. The explanation for like the kind of this commune of women's mystery, like the way that story ended made me so angry. I was like, are you actually joking that that's how you're ending this book? There is no payoff. There is no kind of solution, or like nothing is resolved, or the way that they're trying to resolve this story makes literally no sense, and it just feels like it's kind of completely cutting down any kind of intrigue and mystery that you've been building up, and about anything that were to do with this main character, but like also it's kind of nothing to do with her, which is just feels like, why am I even in this story in the first place? And then this like wider mystery about this noise. Spoiler alert, you never find out. Like, it's never mentioned. It's just like this random thing that happens, and like it doesn't even get mentioned in the like latter half of the story. It's so weird. I didn't understand it. I don't understand why it's called Hagstone. There was one scene when one of the like nun type characters gives the main character a hagstone, and it's like not even relevant to anything that's going on. It's never mentioned again. It doesn't have any like, it's so weird. Like, I don't get what this story was trying to say, other than, oh, it's mysterious and intriguing, but then like there was absolutely no follow through. I really, really, really did not like this one. I gave it like 1.5. I shouldn't have finished it, but I think I have a hard time putting down audiobooks, to be honest, and I did just listen to it all the way through. But this one is not worth your time. I really, really didn't like this one, unfortunately. I think the reason this one annoyed me even more is because it wasn't like the writing was bad and really clumsy, you know, on a sentence level. And it's not like there wasn't intrigue at the beginning, because things were set up. There was like this idea of like this kind of wild woman who was really connected to her art and the place that she lived, and there was like so many different ideas, and they were just basically dropped immediately. So it's not like I was disappointed in the beginning and then it kind of just like got worse. It had quite a lot of promise at the beginning, and then it just got so bad. So yeah, I didn't enjoy this one, unfortunately. The next book that I want to talk about that I did not enjoy, I'm genuinely a bit scared to mention like why I didn't like this one. Not only because it was our book club book, it wasn't for last month, it was the month previous, but it took me a really, really long time to finish this book because I wasn't enjoying it. So I feel like scared to say it because lots of people in the book club enjoyed it, but also just everyone I've seen has given this really, really, really good reviews, and I could not get on with this story at all. So if you're in the book club, you already know which story I'm talking about, and that is In the Shadow of the Banyan. I'm always scared to talk about books like this in a negative light, because I know that this story is covering an incredibly emotional and difficult and personal thing for the author, because you're following basically what actually happened to her in Cambodia during a very brutal time in the history of Cambodia. It's such an important thing to be written about, and I did learn more about Cambodia and this time in Cambodia through this story. But if I'm reflecting on it as a novel, I just have to be very honest and say that I did not think that this was very well written. My first issue is the narrator. It's written from the perspective of a 6-year-old girl. So that already, it's not my favourite thing when we have a very young narrator, but I do think it can be done well. In this case, it was kind of, I don't know why it was done from the perspective of a 6-year-old, because she didn't seem like a 6-year-old in any way. She has like a photographic memory for everything that's ever happened to her, and it seems like she's written from a much, much older perspective, and there was never any point to her being as young as she was. We didn't kind of flash forward in time and kind of have like her remembering things from when she was younger. It was just as if she was a 25-year-old woman inside a 6-year-old's body, but she wasn't even inside a 6-year-old's body, because she could do everything that everyone else was doing at all times. She wasn't very protected as a child, and it didn't make any sense really why she was a 6-year-old, and then also didn't feel like she was as a like from the perspective of her being a narrator. She had incredibly complex ideas about the political structure of what was going on, about poetry, about literature, about folklore, about her family dynamics, her own family history, and then the history of the country as well, which you would never have as a 6-year-old. It wasn't written in the sense of like someone looking back on their life as a 6-year-old. You're looking like presently through the eyes of a child, which I didn't really enjoy. Secondly, this book just felt like a moving from one place to the next place and having events happen to the characters, rather than any kind of reflection on the war, the political sides of it, or any reflection on how the characters, specifically these characters who at the beginning of the book are royalty, they're Cambodian royalty. So the father of the girl in this is a prince, and also the father of the author is a prince, and there wasn't any reflection on the reasons or the way that they would be reacting in this political climate that is happening. For example, the ways that they would be targeted, or like their own biases about what's happening and this kind of revolution that's happening. To be honest, a lot of it felt very, very simplistic. It was, you know, her family and her father especially was like a saint who could do absolutely no wrong ever, who was a perfect man, and this royalty, this prince, like he was like this philosophical prince who was just the perfect person, and everyone else was basically evil. Every kind of side character felt exactly the same, and it's a really long book as well. Actually, it's not even that long. It felt a lot longer than it was, to be honest. Mainly the issue with this was the writing style for me. I really could not get along with the writing style. It felt like it was incredibly slow paced, and every time anything would happen, like you'd be immediately taken away from any action that was happening, and the main character would tell you quite a long story about her childhood or about a folklore story or something that didn't directly kind of relate to what was currently happening, but like anytime any movement happened in the plot, not that there is much actual plot, I would say it's much more of like a historical snapshot than like a plot in like a kind of conventional sense, but anytime anything would happen, you immediately dragged away, and then you'd have to read like sometimes pages and pages of a folklore story or something, or a poem or something along those lines that would just grind the action down to a halt. And I don't feel that the main character grew up during this very much. Like her sense of voice at the beginning of the story and at the end of the story, which are years apart, are basically the exact same. She doesn't become, you know, any more mature, and she doesn't even become really affected by the things that are happening around her, which seems, you know, like very, very unrealistic. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to sound really heartless about this one because so many people love this. So many people find it really beautiful, very moving, and just really, really enjoyed this story, but I personally just couldn't get along with it. I think I would have preferred this as an actual non-fiction autobiographical story, and would have been able to learn more about this time in history in a more informative sense, because this book is very, very flowery. Like the flowery language is heavy, and it's very much like if you enjoy that type of language, then you probably will really enjoy this book, but I don't. Just ultimately, I think I put down this book at the end and I wasn't sure what it was trying to say, other than the fact that this was a horrific and brutal time in the history of Cambodia. I wasn't sure, like I didn't get a very hopeful message from this, and I also got quite a like pro-royalty message from this as well, which felt like kind of strange and sometimes at odds with other things that the book was trying to say. I don't know. Anyway, I'm finding it difficult to talk about this one, but if anyone has had similar opinions about this, then I'd be really interested to know, because this one is hard to discuss why I didn't like it. Even though, honestly, if you look at any reviews for this book, everyone, it's like a 5-star, like across the board. So I'm definitely in the minority there. Next up, let's talk about another disappointing read. And this one is The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. This one I gave like a 2.5 stars out of 5, which is really disappointing because this is the second book in a series. The first one is Swordcatcher, and I quite enjoyed Swordcatcher. I thought it was a really good, strong start to a new like adult fantasy story for Cassandra Clare, but I really could not get along with the second one in the series. This is set in a world called Castellane, which is kind of like a merchant city, and you are following a prince. Well, kind of. You're actually following his sword catcher, which is basically someone who has grown up with this prince and learned how to imitate him, and then in any kind of dangerous situations he can impersonate the prince and kind of be there in case of assassination. He is the sword catcher. And you're also following Lynn, who is a healer but also part of the kind of subjugated class in this city because they still have access to magics and it's kind of a very taboo subject, but she is a very talented healer as well. And you're following these two different POVs, and then in the second book you have a couple more POVs. There was lots of promise in this first book that was then absolutely not delivered in the second one. So many things did not happen, and I feel like that was the main issue that I had with this. Like, the writing is still interesting. It wasn't like really boring or anything like that. I did occasionally enjoy the romantic subplots, although as well I was going through, I just kept thinking that all of these main characters really sounded exactly the same. And there's kind of two parallel love stories that are going on, which in the first book promised to be quite like a slow burn. And then the second book, it's much less slow burn, and also they just sound really similar to each other now, and I'm just like, I don't know if I care about this. Like, you're having the same conversations over and over again, and also both couples are having the same conversations. But just my main issue is that the plot did not move on in any significant way. Like, the first story was very slow, but you're building up this entire world, and I was getting enough intrigue from learning about the world that the lack of plot until the end didn't like bother me too much. But then it had quite an explosive ending, so I was quite excited for the second book. And then the second book just grinds even more to a halt, and I'm not sure that I'm going to carry on with the series, to be honest. Unless I hear really crazy good things about the third book, I don't think I'm going to be picking it up. So this one was unfortunately 2.5 stars out of 5 for me. Next up, let's talk about some books that were good but not great. So these are kind of like right in the middle for me. Like, I enjoyed them, but like, you know, recommending them kind of with a pinch of salt. Firstly, I finally read The 7-Year Slip. I read previously another, is it Ashley Poston? Yeah, Poston. Ashley Poston's previous story, the novel, what's it? A novel love story, and hated it. Hated it so, so much. And I gave a whole rant review of it previously, so you can go and find that if you're interested. Everyone was telling me, no, The 7-Year Slip is her best one. It's like so much better. I can't believe they're written by the same author. Like, you should definitely read The 7-Year Slip. So I did read The 7-Year Slip. And yes, everyone is right. It is definitely better than a novel love story. I enjoyed it a lot more. But I wouldn't say that this is going to be like a new favourite of mine. I think I'm a bit fussy with romance, to be honest. So kind of take this with a pinch of salt. And I would still give this like a 2.5. Like, I'd probably round this up to a 3-star read, like maybe. But it's not something I'm going to pick up again. But I did enjoy it a lot more than her first one, definitely. The cringiness like aspect has turned way down, and I enjoyed the kind of fun aspect of this with a time travel kind of plot. So basically in this story, you are following main character Clementine, who is at a bit of a crossroads in her life, and she's just inherited a apartment in New York from her aunt, and this apartment, she's always been told by her aunt, is kind of magical, and it can slip through time, 7 years back or 7 years into the future. And then she doesn't really believe this, and then one day she walks in and there is a guy in her apartment, and it turns out she has slipped back 7 years in the past. I quite enjoyed their romance. I thought it was really sweet. I enjoyed like the kind of like aspect of it being 7 years in the past. That's very fun to play around with. And I would say by like the halfway point or like the 3/4 way point, I was still really enjoying this book, but it just, something wore me down a little bit. Like, the characters just didn't have quite enough depth for me. I think that I would have preferred maybe 2 different POV chapters, like from his perspective as well. That would have given me a bit more depth. And then also a lot of the stuff, like, it didn't quite make sense all the way through logically. Like, a lot of like how they were meeting, and then there was like kind of not 2 timelines, but like because of the 7-year gap, like they meet in the past and then they also meet in the future, and how those worked out. I was like, but wait, you've just had this conversation, you would already know this thing, and like a lot of the logic didn't follow all the way through. I think if you're less sensitive to stuff like that, because I am quite sensitive to like logical fallacies in books and stuff, and especially in sci-fi, I'm quite specific with sci-fi. If you don't care that much about that, if you're just there for like the fun romance side, I think you would enjoy this a lot more. But some of those things I was just like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because like this would have happened because of this, and like why has he said that because of, you know. So it was fun, but it wasn't nothing I would like say you need to absolutely read this right now. But it was definitely better than her other book that I've read. Next up, another one that was just good but not great, unfortunately, was Good Girl. This was one of the ones that was longlisted for the Women's Prize, and I read it at the beginning of the month. I kind of didn't love this one. I was hoping just for a bit more. This is set in Berlin, and you're following a girl who is the daughter of Afghan refugees, and basically she's kind of living a bit of a split life. She is going out constantly, partying, taking drugs, and like getting into like quite bad situations, but she has to kind of hide this a lot from her family and like her community, her wider family as well. I would say this was written really well. I just think I would have preferred this if this was a YA, because a lot of what this book hinges on is teenage melodrama. Like, it's a lot of it is like kind of stuff that you would find so powerful and so important as a 19-year-old, but then as a 29-year-old, it's like, oh, like that was crazy, wasn't it? Like you would just, it doesn't have the same effect. I also didn't actually love how like the partying aspect was written about in this story. Like there was a lot of heavy like drug use, partying and that kind of thing, but none of it actually seemed to have any effect on her. It was just used as kind of like a, look how crazy I'm being, like I'm snorting all of these different stuff, like, but it wasn't actually like, oh, when you do that, this is the way that you feel, or like this is the type of like reaction you would have even at a party, and then after the fact, like you would have all of these like, you know, physiological things that would happen to you if you're taking that many drugs. None of that was explored within this book. It was just kind of used as this gratuitous drug use, and I just thought that could have been a lot more interesting if we'd actually kind of dug into that a little bit more, or even shown it on the page of like what would happen if you were partying like this. Also, just for me, like the main love story, the toxic love story that's at the middle of this story, felt really like, from the first second that this guy is introduced, you know exactly who he is and how it's going to end. So it relies a lot on the naivety of the main character, and I don't love a naive main character, to be honest, so didn't really work for me. I think it would work for others. I would actually just pitch this to a younger audience actually, rather than an adult audience. I don't know, maybe that's crazy because it's got quite a lot of like drug use in it, and it does touch on heavy topics, but I do think that's still really important for younger people to be talking about. Okay, next up, let's talk about books that were really good, that I do actually recommend. So starting off, I actually read a young adult book this month that was really, really fun, and that is called Not for the Faint of Heart by Lex Croucher. I think I've now read every single Lex Croucher book, which feels crazy. I definitely prefer their adult books, like their adult romances, but I do still like, these are very fun young adult books. This is kind of a Robin Hood alternate history retelling. So Lex usually does like a kind of alternate history, but like with a younger generation. So previously I read a King Arthur one. This is the same thing with Robin Hood. So this is like the granddaughter of Robin Hood. I enjoyed that there was two perspectives in this, and I really actually quite liked the two personalities and the love story that was happening in this. I think perhaps some of the plot like didn't quite work for me as much, but I enjoyed still a lot of like the tension that it brought, especially just for these two like main characters, because that's the thing that I cared about the most. This is something I think that the Lex does really, really well in their books, is just having slightly unlikable, mean or rude or like brittle main characters, and I love reading about people who are slightly unlikable, and I just liked both of them, like had kind of their own issues in their own way, and I really liked how they came together. So if you're looking for a fun young adult kind of fantasy, like not like heavy on magic or anything in any way, but like fantastical adventure story, then definitely pick this one up. Next up, actually, there's two books that I have read this month that I'm doing for my international reading, what even am I titling it? Reading the International Booker Prize shortlist vlog. I'm reading the entire shortlist. I've obviously been reading a few books, but I'm not going to talk about it in this wrap-up video because I want to encourage you to go and watch that vlog. So I'm taking two books out of this pile that I'm not going to be talking about today. So you're going to have to wait for that vlog to see what I think about all of those books. Spoiler alert, it's been very fun so far, but the next book that I will talk about didn't actually make the shortlist, but I did really enjoy it, and that is Hunchback. This one was really, really interesting, and it's a tiny little book. This took me maybe an afternoon to read. It's like less than 100 pages and, you know, not a lot like of words actually on each page, but it was such like, from the moment I started reading it, I was like, what is going on in this book? This is going to be really, really fun. Like the first line of this book is, "My steamy threesome with super sexy students in one of Tokyo's most sought after swingers clubs." This one is crazy. So it's basically about this woman who has a congenital spine deformity or defect, and she basically tweets a lot about her life. She also writes erotic fiction and kind of lives a very online life. And then one day she gets a new male carer, and he reveals that he's read everything she's ever published online, and he kind of gives her this proposition about something that she's been writing about online. And that's all I'll tell you because it's like very short, like I said, so there's not much to it. And I just thought that this was really good. I thought it was really wild, really funny. I actually just would have loved this to be even longer and explored the kind of concepts that it was exploring even more deeply, because it's a lot about kind of power dynamics, but not in the sense of the normal way that you talk about power dynamics. It's about kind of class and power and money and sex and disability, and there's a lot in here that I really, really enjoyed. And I honestly just wished it was even longer, because it was written in such a stark way as well. Like, it is very provocative, as people have been saying. So can highly, highly recommend Hunchback as well. And I kind of wish it did get shortlisted, but alas, it did not. Next up, another book that I'm really glad that I managed to finish, because it was another one that I was worried it was going to put me in a slump, actually. Even though it did end up enjoying it, but that is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This one I don't think is going to top my kind of Sally Rooney list. I think still at the top of my personal ranking is Beautiful World, Where Are You? Is that what it is? Yeah, I always say the name wrong. But I actually did enjoy this story. I think that, to be honest, following two main male characters, I think, is what like would push it down slightly for me. That sounds so mean, but it's also just like slightly less relatable to me. Like, unfortunately, some of the main like female characters in this felt a little bit one-dimensional. But this story is about two brothers who think that they're complete opposites to each other. The younger brother is kind of a geeky chess champion, and he's always like struggled with feeling like he's never been like quite good enough. And then his older brother is like quite charismatic and capable, but kind of also his life is falling apart, but he's acting very strong for everyone else around him. The highlight of this book is definitely their sibling relationship and the evolution of how that comes across. I thought it was done really realistically. It was done very slowly, and I really enjoyed, you know, the way that they were both looking at their own relationship with their brother. I just thought it was very, very, very well done. I just didn't as much love like the romances that were in this. I think that especially for actually kind of all three of the women that are in this were very much as an accessory to these two male characters, which I mean is kind of realistic in their own personal like POVs, but I just felt like it didn't have the depth there like that this sibling relationship had. I also really enjoyed it as an aspect of grief and kind of how grief can affect your life, and that was, I think, done also really, really beautifully. There were passages in this that I read and I started crying at one point in this book, but then also there were passages that dragged on and on and on, and I felt like just fell really flat. So very, very mixed opinions about this one, but overall I would round this up to a 4-star read, because anything that can make me tear up, you know, like that, it's doing pretty good. So kind of a 4-star read, kind of a 3.75, you know, it's like hovering around there. I'd be hesitant to like say go and read this one, you absolutely must, but I can definitely see that this will hit with like a certain group of people. So next up, another really sad book that I really liked, and that is Against the Loveless World. This one was so powerful, and honestly it kind of was sitting in direct contrast to In the Shadow of the Banyan to me, because I'd read this one first and then I was a little bit nervous that this was going to be quite similar, but I much preferred the way that this story was written. So in this book you're following a woman who in the present timeline is sitting in an Israeli prison. She is calling this place the Cube because it's 4 walls and she is just never allowed out of it. And then basically you go back in time and you follow her life as a Palestinian woman. She grew up actually in Kuwait because her mother had to flee Palestine. And so she grew up in Kuwait, and then this story moves from Kuwait to Jordan to Palestine. I really, really loved this story, and especially loved this main character. Just the most gritty, determined person who would do anything to survive and to help her own family. But that isn't just who she was as well. She had an incredibly I think very complicated personality, and she really pulls you through this entire story. This book to me just did not shy away from anything. She felt like such a realistic character because of how she'd grown up and then how she would have seen the world, and this title Against the Loveless World, because so many awful things happen to this main character, and not just her but lots of people around her. But She pulls you through this story of just like trial after trial, but like somehow like it doesn't feel like one of those books where it just feels like constantly awful things are happening to someone, although that is what's happening. She is so like unyielding as a main character that it just like pulls you through and you kind of rally with her. I just think it was so brave. The only reason I would say that I'm not giving this 5 stars is because I actually did not love the like romantic element to this story, and like mainly like the latter third of the story where that really kind of kicked up. I just felt like it was kind of almost happening to a different woman as the first 2/3 of the story, because in the first 2/3 you're really rooted in her and her family and like her working to survive, and then it's kind of only in the last third where like this romantic element is introduced, which I feel like, I don't know, it did feel like a kind of a separate story pushed into this story. I would highly recommend this book. This is a beautiful story. It is so painful at times to read, but very incredible, and I'm really glad that I read it. So that is Against the Loveless World. And then the final book that I want to talk about today, also I really enjoyed it, and also if you've been following my Women's Prize vlogs, you know that I've enjoyed this one, and that is A Little Trickery. This one I was really surprised that I enjoyed as well, because it's a historical fiction. It's set in Tudor England, and I'm like a bit hit and miss honestly with like especially English historical fiction, so I was really surprised by how much I love this. And this is another one that is basically down to the protagonist and how the protagonist carries you through this story. She is just such an interesting character. Honestly, I read this half physically and then half as an audiobook, and I would highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator does an excellent job because the protagonist in this story is a vagabond, so she is traveling from place to place, and it's illegal to be a vagabond, so she's constantly being run out of places that she lives. At the beginning of this story, she is with her mother, and then sadly her mother dies. That's not a spoiler, that happens very early on. And then so she is basically all alone in the world, and honestly she just was the perfect mix between like naive but like world weary, and like happy and joyful but like never passive. And she was just like a very kind-hearted character that just like wouldn't let herself be taken advantage of. I don't know, like I really loved her. And I also loved the plot of this one. It was very fun and it was very like unusual, and I wouldn't have guessed where it was going to end, because basically to survive she has to play tricks on people, and then she does this kind of grand trick in the story and it doesn't go exactly as planned. But I just really liked this. I liked the side characters as well. They kind of paled in comparison to our main character in this. She was definitely the shining star, but absolutely loved it. Really fun. Really like didn't feel bored at any sense in this story. Just really wanted to keep reading, and also it made me cry right at the beginning. So therefore this I'm rating like a 4.25, maybe 4.5 stars. Absolutely loved this one, and I also love the cover of this. It's so cute. This one here, that's our main character. I was just so surprised at how funny and joyous this one was. So it was a great pace breaker within some other like heavier literary fiction reads this month. But that is all the books I'm going to talk about, because I'm not going to talk about 2 of them. So that's 13 books that I've talked about. I think I had overall a really good reading month, even though there was a few in there that just didn't work for me, and a couple that I was scared that were going to put me into a slump. But overall I'm very happy. I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreons. Thank you so much for being here and helping support this channel. You are my favorite people on the planet, and I love you so much. Thank you so much for supporting me. If you're interested in checking out the Patreon, there is always a link in the description below. But even if you don't want to join the Patreon, then please could you like this video? That really helps me out with the algorithm, and make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. But other than that, I think that's everything that I wanted to show you and talk about with you today. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will talk to you all again soon. Bye!